Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Great Life, Great Practice podcast takeover. I'm calling it a takeover because I have taken the reins from your usual host, Steve Riley, today, and I get to interview him. So I'm Valerie Peterson, the CEO of Atticus, and it is my great pleasure to take over today and interview Steve Riley, who is normally the host of the podcast. Welcome, Steve. How are you today?
Thank you, Valerie. I knew it was only a matter of time before you take over the podcast. I just knew it. I knew as a short timer. I knew my life as a podcast host was coming to a close. I didn't think it'd be so fast.
Well, you had a good run, Steve. You had a great run. Really. Yes.
I gave it my best effort.
All right. Well, in all seriousness, Steve and I are going to talk today about how to achieve peak performance as a lawyer. Steve, I know this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. You've taught about it. You've discussed it, just internally a lot. Why is this topic so important for you?
It's probably the crux of how to grow a law firm. And a lot of lawyers are really after, I want to make more money. I want to have great practice. I want to have a great life. And they ignore probably the most fundamental strategy to do it. So they're always worried about how many hours they work. They're always worried about um, being in the office. They're always worried about pushing. And consequently, the biggest blind spot for the growth of their practice ultimately is their own energy level. So I struggle with a lot of lawyers on this because it's counterintuitive, Valerie. When you think about it, they want to work a lot of hours. And if you think about what clients are paying for, the clients are usually paying for the lawyer's judgment, the ability to solve a complex problem, the ability to think through an issue that the client can't solve themselves. So if you're a lawyer, really what they're after is your cognitive capability, your energy level, your creativity, and your ability to solve these problems. So you have to ask yourself as a lawyer, are you currently performing at your peak? And if you're not, what can you do? Because you really can't do a great job as a lawyer if you're exhausted. Then if you think about trying to grow a law firm, you really can't do a great job as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a change agent growing the law firm if you're not at a good spot with your own energy. So it's a double win for me. I want you to perform well as a lawyer. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or a team leader or what have you. It doesn't really matter, but your peak performance has an incredible influence on people. And the ability to grow is really a lot dependent on the energy that you bring, the wind that you bring and put into the cells of the firm from a leader and a manager perspective.
Well, Steve, how then do you help law firm owners or attorneys who have been stuck in that kind of situation? How do you get them to recognize that they're not operating at their peak performance and that, in fact, it's impeding their growth as a law firm?
Some you can't save. So this is important to understand that inside our community, the conversation around great practice, great life is more of a movement for me. It's more of a rallying cry to break away from the gravitational pulls of how normal lawyers think and how normal lawyers practice. And some lawyers just can't see that. And so they can't see that mindset, that mentality, that culture. While it may look like a machismo, I'm such a badass because I'm cranking out like these hours, I'm outworking everybody. It's hard to tell them after 10 or 15 years. Number one, you'll never outwork any of the practice problems, but you'll actually probably work yourself into what I call the pit of despair, which is burnout, depression, anxiety, alcoholism. The depression rates for lawyers is 3 times the national average. We commit suicide at a higher statistical rate, about 3 times. We have alcohol and drug abuse problems, double than the national average. The highest risk of suicide, interestingly enough, in the legal industry are among minority attorneys who are male, who are married with young children at home between the ages of, I believe, 35 and like 48, which is unbelievable. Like they're at the highest risk. So some of these lawyers were just not going to be able to help because they either don't want it, they can't see it, and to them, this perception that they need to work harder than anyone else is just that, a perception. It's not a truth. It's just a perception. And you may not be able to save them. Like you may not be able to help them. So I try and pay attention to the ones that are sufficiently suffering. Like they're sufficiently suffering and they go, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different approach to practicing. There's got to be a different way of living. There's got to be a different way of existing than how everyone else is doing it. So these lawyers are usually kind of renegades. They're kind of pirates. They're kind of, uh, they're unique thinkers. And they've always felt like they didn't belong to the club, the elite club of certain law firms. They don't fit into the large law firms. They know they don't fit. And that's why I think they respond so well to a conversation around what does a great life and a great practice look like to you? And when they start to look at it, then they start to take a step back and go, okay, what's not working about this? And the first thing I would try and do is to get them just to be aware, to be cognizant of the path they're currently on and the price they're going to pay to stay on that path. They can choose to stay on it, but that's the first thing to do is make them aware of it.
So, are you telling me that in order to help a law firm grow, which many equate with revenue, higher revenue, more disposable income, that attorneys should actually be focusing on their own personal well-being as opposed to going out and doing 5 more speaking events to get more money? I mean, everybody wants more money. You're telling me that taking care of myself will actually help with that?
Well, it depends on how quickly you want to grow. So this is the thing. You could do the 5 more speaking events, but my assertion is it's going to take longer for your law firm to grow because you lack the energy, you lack the cognitive capability, you lack the clarity, you lack the excitement to actually grow your practice. So the easiest way to think about this is think about when you've been at your best health-wise, Valerie. So think about when you've been at your best health-wise. What do you like in the office? And I know you practice, so what was like when you're at your best? What do you like inside the office?
Oh gosh, I was pleasant. Yeah. Supportive, the
Well,
just all the best versions, I would say, of me. Patient, which, as you know, is not always my strong suit. And when I'm tired, complete opposite. Very impatient, quick, snap decisions that aren't well thought out. Just definitely the opposite of what I would consider the best version or the person I want to be, the leader I want to be. You're taking a path with law firm owners that is certainly not the path of least resistance because as lawyers, we weren't trained to take care of ourselves. We were trained to just think harder, read more, do more research. It really goes back to that work harder to be successful. And you are using peak performance for lawyers similarly to how athletes, want to operate at peak performance. Does that analogy, is that accurate for lawyers to think about and
I
being peak performers?
I think it's a great analogy, and you're very insightful there, Valerie, because I think where I started trying to figure out how to help lawyers was to really study how top performing athletes were recovering. And I remember, and I've talked about this in some of our programs, how LeBron James. So I watched how LeBron James, the great basketball player, was being treated between championship games. And they have a whole recovery process that was designed to get him back on the court at peak performance as quickly as possible. And so I started talking to lawyers that were unable to I'm getting ready to take a 3-week vacation, which most lawyers are like, there's just no way in my entire life can I take a 3-week vacation. And for me, that's part of my creativity protocol, part of my recovery protocol. But for some lawyers, like, dude, there's just no way. I got 3 kids. I got my spouse. I got a trial coming up. I can't do that. So I started saying, create what I call a rapid recovery day. Think about what one day would be a luxurious one day for what we could do to focus on getting you back in the courtroom or back on the court as quickly as possible. So for me, a rapid recovery day might be a massage, no work, going to a movie, time with my family, and getting a full night's sleep, and going back in the next day in a way that would be impactful. So I think if you're listening to this and you're like, there's just no way I can do all this, just start with a rapid recovery day. Start with one day, even if you can squeeze in one a month or maybe one a week. What can I do to design one day that I get the best recovery I possibly can, so that when I go back into the office, I'm playing at my peak? So LeBron James, they put him in an ice bath. They put him on IV fluids if he's on an airplane. They give him a particular diet. They have massage after the game, massage before the game. They have certain exercises he does. So they have a whole protocol.